The training hall of the Galactic Combat Academy stretched vast and imposing, its crystalline walls reflecting the harsh artificial light that illuminated every corner. Instructor Vexithur, a towering Krellian with forearms and scales that shimmered like polished obsidian, stood at the center of the arena, his voice booming across the space. "Listen well. Cadets," Vexithur announced, his multiple eyes scanning the diverse group of alien species assembled before him. "In all my centuries of training warriors from across the galaxy, I have observed one universal truth. No species possesses the neural coordination required to effectively dual-wield bladed weapons in combat. The cognitive load is simply too great." Annie stood among the crowd, her human frame appearing almost fragile compared to the hulking Thoraxians and the serpentine zephyrs surrounding her. Her blonde hair was tied back in a practical ponytail, and her green eyes gleamed with quiet determination. Beside her, Massey, a fellow human cadet with dark curly hair and an easy smile, nudged her gently. "Here we go again," Massey whispered, knowing that look in Annie's eyes all too well. They had grown up together on the outer colonies, where humans were still considered novelties in the greater galactic community. Where others saw limitations, Annie saw challenges. Vexithur continued his lecture, gesturing with two of his arms while the other two rested at his sides. "The Krellians attempted it with our forearms failure. The Zephyrs tried with their enhanced reflexes disaster. Even the telepathic Mindari could not overcome the fundamental neurological barrier. Single weapon mastery is the path to true combat effectiveness." Annie's jaw tightened. She had heard variations of this speech before, on different worlds, in different training facilities. Always the same conclusion: humans were too slow, too weak, too limited. She thought of her grandmother, who had been a fencer on Earth, who had told her stories of historical warriors who fought with two weapons, of samurai with katana and wakizashi, of medieval knights with sword and dagger. "Permission to speak, Instructor?" Annie's voice cut through the murmurs of the assembled cadets. Vexithur's eyes swiveled toward her, a mixture of curiosity and condescension in his gaze. The human cadet: "Proceed. With respect, Instructor, I'd like to challenge that assertion." A ripple of surprised chittering and growls spread through the crowd. Massey closed his eyes briefly, shaking his head with a mixture of pride and concern. He had seen Annie in action before, knew her capabilities, but challenging a decorated Krellian instructor on the first day of advanced combat training was bold even for her. Challenge? Vexithur's scales seemed to darken, a sign of his amusement. "You believe you can accomplish what countless species, many far superior to humans in physical and mental capacity, have failed to achieve?" Annie stepped forward, her boots clicking against the polished floor. "I believe that can't is often just another word for hasn't tried hard enough, Instructor." The training hall fell silent. Even the bioluminescent lumens stopped their gentle pulsing, their attention riveted on the small human standing before the imposing instructor. Vexithur studied her for a long moment, then gestured toward the weapon rack with one massive arm. "Very well, Cadet Annie. Select your weapons. Let us see this human miracle." Annie walked to the rack, her heart pounding but her movements controlled and deliberate. She selected two standard issue practice swords, their weight balanced for the average galactic warrior, which meant they were heavier than anything designed for human use. She tested each one, feeling the weight distribution, adjusting her grip. Massey watched from the sidelines, his fingers drumming nervously against his thigh. He knew Annie had been practicing, had seen her working late into the night cycles in the auxiliary training rooms. But this was different. This was public, official, and against an instructor who had just declared the task impossible. "Whenever you're ready, Cadet," Vexithur said, activating a combat drone. The spherical machine hummed to life, its weapons set to training mode but still capable of delivering punishing blows that could break bones and bruise even thick alien hides. Annie centered herself. Taking a deep breath, she held one sword in each hand, her stance wide and grounded. To the observers, she looked impossibly small, a creature out of her depth. But her eyes were focused, her breathing steady. The drone attacked. What happened next would be discussed in academy halls for years to come. Annie moved like water, like wind, like something that existed between the spaces where logic declared movement impossible. Her left sword parried, her right sword struck. She didn't use the weapons independently, she used them as extensions of a unified intent, each blade working in harmony with the other, creating patterns of defense and offense that the combat drone's programming hadn't anticipated. The sword in her left hand deflected a strike upward while her right blade swept low, scoring a direct hit on the drone's lower sensor ray. She spun, both weapons creating a defensive barrier that turned aside a barrage of training rounds, then pressed forward, her footwork carrying her inside the drone's optimal range. One sword created an opening, the other exploited it. 90 seconds later, the drone's systems registered critical damage and shut down. Dropping to the floor with a metallic clang, Annie stood in the center of the arena, breathing hard, sweat glistening on her forehead, both swords still held in ready position. Slowly, the training hall erupted into a cacophony of sounds, cheers from some species, confused whistles from others, and the rhythmic thumping of tails against the floor from the Thoraxians, their species equivalent of applause. Vexithor approached, his expression unreadable. He stopped before Annie, towering over her diminished human frame. Then, slowly, he inclined his massive head, a gesture of respect rarely given by Krellians. "Define can't, Instructor," Annie said quietly, lowering her swords. "It appears," Vexithor replied, his voice carrying across the now silent hall, "that I must revise my centuries of observation." "Well fought, Cadet Annie. Perhaps humans have something to teach us after all." Massey pushed through the crowd, grinning widely. "That's my girl," he said proudly, never knowing when to quit. Annie smiled back, exhaustion finally showing in her features. "Not quitting," she corrected, "just refusing to accept limits that don't make sense." As the cadets dispersed and the training session continued, word began to spread through the Academy's networks. A human had done the impossible. A human had proven that perhaps the galaxy's assumptions about limitations needed to be reconsidered. And in the corner of the training hall, Annie cleaned and returned her weapons, already thinking about what other impossible challenges she might tackle next. Because if there was one thing humans had proven throughout their short time among the stars, it was this: they had a peculiar habit of redefining what was possible.